Welcome to Back in the Groove. If you're new here, my name's Keith, and I'm getting back into my vinyl collection after having it in storage for more than 25 years. Now, in this video, I'm going to be continuing to look at my collection through the lens of a specific year, and I'll be wrapping up the 1980s with a close look at 1989. Now, as always, when I'm doing these videos, I'm going to be racing through lots of albums and won't have time to cover each of them in absolute detail, but we'll stop and check in on a few of the highlights along the way, I'm sure. And this is one of those highlights. This is Blue Murder, a fantastic debut album with John Sykes on vocals and guitar, Tony Franklin on bass, and Carmine Appice on drums. And this was just one of the best debuts ever, I think. Some fantastic songs on it, great songwriting from Sykes, a great vocal performance, and of course some amazing guitar work from him. Some classics on here like Valley of the Kings, which was co-written by Tony Martin of Black Sabbath fame, but lots of great tracks on here. You got Billy, you got Out of Love is an absolutely fantastic ballad. Tommy Blackhearted Woman. Every track is an absolute belter. Now, on to another massive favourite of mine, and that's TNT. And this one is Intuition, which is one of my all-time fave albums, if I'm honest. Tony Harnell singing on here with Ronnie Latecro on guitar. And it just starts out brilliantly, this album, with this great intro for A Nation Free. Goes into Caught Between the Tigers with a great riff, and then Tonight I'm Falling's a great track. End of the Line is an absolutely amazing sort of power ballad as well, and then you've got The Wacky Ordinary Lover later on, and just another amazing album with some fantastic guitar work. Speaking of good guitar work, we've got Bad English with Neil Schon on guitar, and one of my all-time favourite singers, John Waite. And this is another great debut. They only did, I think, 2 albums, and this is the better of the 2, in my opinion. Starts off with The Best of What I've Got. Heaven is a Four-letter word. Forget Me Not was, I think, the intro single to this. Was a great video at the time as well for MTV. Probably the bigger commercial hit was When I See You Smile, of course, which is the ballad of the album, or one of the ballads. But you've got other great tracks like Ghost in Your Heart and Lay Down's a bit of a rocker, etc. But another great debut album. And speaking of great debut albums, another cracker here with Badlands, with the amazing Ray Gillan on vocals, and Jakey Lee of Ozzy Osbourne fame as well. And a great album, and we've got a real sort of different style going on here, sort of slightly reminiscent of sort of Zeppelin, a callback to the more classic stripped back era. Winter's Call is an absolutely amazing track. High Wire starts the album, of course, with that great riff of Jakey Lee's, and it's just again a brilliant song, a brilliant song, a brilliant album. But it's just a really well put together debut with a fairly unique sound. Now, moving on to next album is John Sloman. This is Disappearances Can Be Deceptive. And you might remember John Sloman was vocalist in Uriah Heep and Lone Star, etc. And at times he's got a great voice, and he really sort of sings well, shines, if you like, on this album. It's a really good solo album with tracks like Fooling Myself. Parting Line is a great song. Breathless Save Us is a really good sort of ballad as well. A really good solo effort, and probably some of John Sloman's best work, if you ask me. He always seems to have suffered with poor quality, if you like, health of his vocals. He's never been able to do well on tour, I don't think, and his voice just hasn't held up well under pressure. But a good vocalist, and I absolutely love Lone Stars Firing on All Six. Has got to be well up there in my top ranked albums. Now, speaking of top ranked albums, Drive, She Said, this is their debut. This was another good debut if you're into a more melodic AOR style of music, with Mark Mangold on here, who was famous. I think he was in Touch and a few other well-known bands. If This Is Love starts out with the album really strongly. Don't You Know What Love Is? Just a really good melodic AOR album, and well worth checking out if you're into that style. Next up, we've got Extreme with their first album, of course, the amazing Nuno Betancourt on guitar. Extreme, of course, did have a hiatus where they'd broken up after, I think, the third album, the three, and they sort of went their own ways. Gary Sharon was doing his own thing, joined Van Halen, of course. But they're back together again and seem to be as strong as ever. This has got some great stuff on. Starts out with Little Girls. You got Mother Don't Want to Go to School Today, was a really good track of the time. Kid Ego, etc. And not as good as the follow-up Pornograffiti, but still a very good album. Speaking of good albums, Black Sabbath's Headless Cross with Tony Martin on vocals. And I assume that Tony Martin, I mentioned him earlier, writing the Blue Murder track Valley of the Kings. I imagine that the Blue Murder project failed with him because of him joining Sabbath. And I think that's probably when John Sykes decided to do the vocals. But this was a good intro for Tony Martin to Black Sabbath. They've got the title track, Headless Cross, is a really good track. You got When Death Calls and several other good tracks on there, but a really good album. Next up, a slightly different vibe with this. This is the Dan Reed Network with Slam. And at this point in time, I think we were seeing a lot more sort of funk orientated music creeping into heavy metal. This was probably one of the most sort of ethnically diverse heavy bands that I was probably aware of, but an absolutely fantastic album. Very different to anything else that I'd sort of heard at the time, probably, again, because of the funkiness of the music and the approach that they took. But songs like Tiger in a Dress was fantastic. Rainbow Child's a really good ballad, of course. But then you've got Cruise Together, Stronger Than Steel, another good ballad. Some really good stuff on this particular album, and well worth trying out if you've not heard it, because it is quite a unique vibe. Next up, we've got Rush with Presto, and this is, for me, one of the better Rush albums, or the better latter albums, shall we say. In other words, after the Moving Waves and Moving Pictures, Permanent Waves, mixing two albums up together there. But this was a really strong album, I think, particularly with songs like Anagram. I think Warpaint's on here as well. And this was a really strong album from Rush. Next up, a lesser known band. This is Sacred Warrior and Master's Command. And this looks like a very dark album cover. You sort of conjures up real sort of dark heavy metal, but they're actually a Christian band. And I would liken the sound of them to probably be the most like Queensryche I've heard a band be. The singer's very like Jeff Tate, and some great stuff on here. And I think this goes for good money as well. So a band well worth checking out if you're a Queensryche fan. Next up, we got Kiss and Hot in the Shade. This was Kiss probably trying to regain some popularity. I think that by this time, popularity had waned from them enormously. And I think that had been a downward trend, hadn't it, since taking the makeup off, if we're honest. I don't think this is a great album at all. There's not too much to it that I remember. I think Hide Your Heart Forever was the big ballad. And I think Little Caesar is well known for being the only song I think that Eric Carr sings on for Kiss. Next up, we've got Lukather. This is Steve Lukather of Toto, and this is a good melodic rock record. The first track is called Twist the Knife, which features Edward Van Halen on guitar and sounds very like a Van Halen track, if I'm honest. Lots of other famous artists on here as well, and each of the songs gives sort of full writing credits and production credits as well. You've got Steve Lukather with Steve Stevens, with Edward Van Halen, with Randy Goodrum. There's just, it's like a who's who. You've got Prairie Prince on here playing drums on one song from the Tubes, and lots of other people from the Toto family, the LA scene. You got Richard Marx, etc. Donnie Miller, another decent AOR hard rock album. No massive standouts for me, and if I'm honest, a long time since I've listened to this album. But next up, we've got Wasp with The Headless Children, and another good, strong Wasp album. Some great tracks on here, starting with The Heretic. The Real Me was a great single, I think, as well as Mean Man, which starts side 2, and another good, strong song. Forever Free, Rebel in the FDG, etc. A really good, strong Wasp album there. Bit of a mixed bag, I think, for Whitesnake in Slip of the Tongue. This is the album that they brought Steve Vai in, I think, quite late in the day, following some issues with Vivian Campbell and Vandenberg, etc. And it's because of that, I think, has a slightly odd feel to it. You've got Fool for Your Loving, you know, a remake of the version, which is decent, but I always loved the original anyway of that. The Deeper the Love is a good ballad, but then you got things like Judgment Day, which is good, and then Sailing Ships at the end of the album, which is Adrian Vandenberg and Dave Coverdale doing probably something that comes as close to some Deep Purple vibes from sort of Burn era. Next up, XYZ, another melodic rock band. I think these started out in France, if I remember rightly, moved over to LA, took on a couple of American band members after some of the others had abandoned ship. And a decent album, but nothing too stellar. Opening track Maggie was pretty decent. What Keeps Me Loving You and Inside Out, I think, were the big MTV kind of videos that they did. Next up, Wolfsbane. Don't really know why I've got this, probably just because of Iron Maiden. I probably came to this late. But if I'm honest, you know, I've never liked Blaze Bayley as a singer, either in Maiden or out of it. And this is a pretty poorly recorded album, if I remember rightly. In fact, I think they remade this. This is called Live Fast, Die Fast, but I think they made a remake called Live Fast, Die Faster, which is meant to be a kind of re-recorded version of it. Next up, we've got White Lion with Big Game. White Lion seemed to have a pretty big future at the time this was out. I think this was probably their third album. Had a bit of a unique sound, some good videos on MTV, etc. This featured Vito Bratta on guitar, who for me at the time was probably the most Edward Van Halen-esque guitarist at the time. You've got the vocals of Mike Tramp, which were a little strained at times. He's got a decent enough voice, but not stellar. It's also got James Lomenzo, who I think went on to Megadeth fame after this. Interestingly, after White Lion split up, Vito Bratta, I think, just went missing. I don't think he was ever in another band after that, which was surprising for such a talented guitarist. But this has got some good tracks: Going Home Tonight, Little Fighter, Living on the Edge, all really good tracks. Next up, we've got Vow Wow with V or 5, I guess this is. And this features Neil Murray. Vow Wow, if you don't know, we're a Japanese band. So there are 4 Japanese band members, and then you get Neil Murray in on bass as well. The singer, who I think is called Genki Hitomi, I think. I think that's right. It's got a strange voice, a little like a kind of, the closest thing I can think is a kind of a Dave Meniketti-ish kind of voice. They do a cover of the Beatles' Helter Skelter on here. Other things like Rock Me Now was, I think, a bit of a single at the time as well. While we're talking about Japanese bands, we've got Ezo or Ezo, never quite sure how that should be pronounced, and this is Fire Fire. This is the follow-up to their debut, and you might remember on the debut they were wearing kind of makeup a la kind of Kiss vibes. The hair was all done in different ways, and they all had a black makeup on, a black and white makeup, and it seems like they've dropped that kind of imagery for the second album. If I'm honest, I don't think I've listened to this yet. I actually picked this up a month or 2 back at a record store, and have not had time to play it as yet. Next up, we've got Victory and Culture Killed the Native. I think probably one of Victory's probably more prominent albums, or one of the more better thought of albums. Good, hard, melodic rock, and highly rated by many. Next up, Queen and The Miracle. Bit of a mixed bag, Queen, at this point. I think I'd probably given up on them by now. I think I'd seen them in the Hot Space tour, and what came after that wasn't doing an awful lot for me. This has got I Want It All was a big one on here. You got Breakthrough. Was It All Worth It is probably the rockiest track on the album, and is my favorite from the album. It's kind of a look back at the career, I think, and kind of says, what was it all worth it? I think they'd had some problems before this with Brian May's divorce, and I think Freddie had probably just been diagnosed with HIV, etc. So they'd not had a good time. Next up, we've got Prince with Batman. I think this is a soundtrack. Can't remember playing this much, if I'm honest with you, so not really in a position to comment too much. I was a big Prince fan and probably picked this up at the time, but after playing it once or twice, there was nothing really stood out for me, and I don't recall playing it very much at all. Next up, we've got Doro. This is Doro. I think, is this her first album after leaving Warlock? She does a cover of White Shade of Pale on here, which is pretty poor, if I'm honest, in my opinion anyway. I've heard some great versions of A White Shade of Pale from HSAS, which was a Sammy Hagar band with him and Neil Schon, I think. And my favorite is a Glenn Hughes version of A Whiter Shade of Pale that he does. Typical German heavy rock fare. I'm not a fan of female singers, as I probably say time and time again on the channel as well. Next up, we've got another Rush album. This was a live album, A Show of Hands, and a decent enough live album. Not sure what is to be said beyond that. Seems to cover the Power Windows era and you know, that kind of era of the band. It has got Witch Hunt on, Force 10, Time Stand Still, etc. Red Sector A from Grace Under Pressure, etc. But I always like the drum solos on the Rush live albums. So this has got the Rhythm Method on, which is obviously Neil Peart doing his thing. And I don't know if it's the first time he does it, but it's the one where in the middle of the drum solo, you start getting all these sort of brass bursts, very sort of swing feel to the drum solo, and it's really cool stuff if you're into drums. Next up, we've got Tesla with The Great Radio Controversy, a great album by Tesla. Things like Heaven's Trail on here, Hang Tough, the opener's a great track as well. Yesterday's Gone, Love Song. There's just some great tracks on there. I love early Tesla. Starship with Love Among the Cannibals. I remember really liking this at the time, but I think it's a bit too 80s, overproduced, too many sort of drum machines and effects and things going on in the background. A little bit sort of Mr. kind of vibe to it. And you know, it's an okay album, but very, very dated in my opinion now. Next up, FM and Tough It Out. Some great stuff on here. We can see straight away Bad Luck is absolutely belter of a track, and Someday You'll Come Running. Those are both tracks that they still do today live in concert. I think I saw them just at the back end of last year. Of course, Steve Overland, you know, still there on vocals, along with Merv Goldsworthy and Pete Jupp, etc. In the band still. But a very good FM album. Up next, Faith No More, The Real Thing. This is the album, I think, that Mike Patton joins the band, and they have the literally the song called Epic, which is pretty epic at the time and a massive hit on MTV. And I think they're really starting to find the feet on this album in terms of the sound that they want and putting all of the pieces together. So you've got Epic, you've got Falling to Pieces, ironically, and a really decent album. Next up, an album from Elvis Costello, Spike. Now, I've said several times on the video that Elvis Costello's, you know, an artist that I'm very fond of, got pretty much everything he's ever done. And this was an album that I liked, certainly in part at least. There are songs like Let Him Dangle, which is a great song, and I love the story behind it, which is a story about a true sort of crime, and the guys literally you know, kind of being hung, which is obviously what they used to do in the UK when they're passing a death sentence, etc. And then you've got things like Any King Shilling on here, and Pads, Paws and Claws is a great track as well, which I think was written with Paul McCartney. And I think Paul McCartney had quite an involvement in some of the songwriting on this album. Next up, we've got Alice Cooper and Trash, and this is Alice trying to regain some popularity. I think he's got the hit on here with Poison, very 80s, and I think on this album he's teaming up with Desmond Child and John Bon Jovi, etc. So you've got Poison, Bed of Nails, Hell is Living Without You. It's actually produced by Desmond Child, the album. So a very typically 80s rock album, but not a bad album in Alice Cooper's discography. Not up there with his early works, but still not too bad. Another female singer now with Robin Beck, and this is Trouble or Nothing. And this is, one of those that's very 80s rock. It's a little bit like 80s era Heart for me, and the kind of hair videos that they had where they were doing the power ballads like Alone and things like that. And I think this is a little bit like that with Hide Your Heart, Hold Back the Night, and things like that. But again, I'm not the biggest female vocal fan, so not a fan of that. Torino, I think we're a UK band. This is called Rocket. And if I remember correctly, the production on this was awful. And I think that's what really let the album down, the songs down, and meant that I really didn't give it very much attention at the time. Time Gallery. This, I think I've got a feeling these were a Swedish band. Looking at the names, they look like they would be. I think of these as a very 80s. Again, I've used this sort of term earlier, but very sort of polished, Mr. Robbie Neville kind of vibe to them. Very poppy, rocky kind of vibe. Next up, Motley Crue with Dr. Feelgood, probably commercially their best-selling album, probably, I imagine, with things like Dr. Feelgood on here. And it's quite a varied album, I think, for them. Decent enough. I'd probably gone off Motley Crue by this stage, if I'm honest. I'd kind of got in to them right at the start with Too Fast for Love and that kind of thing. And by this point, I'd sort of fallen out of love with them. But it's not a bad album. Next up, Shy, Misspent Youth. This is an album I never really got into, and a band I never really got into. I don't know why, if I'm honest, because I think it's fairly okay-ish melodic hard rock, but there's just something about Tony Mills's voice I just never got away with, and I really hated it when Tony Mills joined TNT after Tony Harnell had left the band. So not a big album for me. Next up, we've got Michael Bolton with Soul Provider. Some decent stuff on here. So the track itself, title track, Soul Provider, was all right. Georgia on My Mind. How Am I Supposed to Live Without You? They're very typically polished Michael Bolton type tracks, that polished AOR of the time. And then next up, we've got a band called Guardian, who were a Christian rock, Christian metal band. I think this was produced by one of the guys out of Striper. And I also think that although these went on to do several albums, I've got a feeling that a couple of the band members left after this particular album. It's okay. But I think, there was that period where I got a bit sick of kind of Christian rock. Once sort of Striper came out, you got bands like Whiteheart, etc. There was just seemed to be a glut of Christian rock. Next up, we've got How To. This is Greg Howe, who is a guitar virtuoso. Came out around the time that Richie Kotzen hit the scene. We had Vinnie Moore, we had Paul Gilbert, and lots of other guitarists that were, real virtuoso guitarist, I guess is the word I'm looking for. This is not that, because this is the record label, whoever, wanting to set up a band for Greg Howe, and in doing that, he's brought his brother in, Al, on vocals, and created this band. And overall, it's a pretty good album. I have to say, I haven't listened to this for a long time, but his brother's not bad on vocals, and Greg Howe sounds pretty good. He's got the riffs. He's been controlled a little bit more with his playing, and a little bit more focused with the lead guitar in there, the solos, etc. And it leaves you with not a bad hard rock album. Next up, we've got Ace Frehley with Trouble Walking, and I'm not sure which number we're at in Ace's discography now. I think this is probably his third or fourth solo album, but this is a pretty decent one. He's got a cover on here. Do Ya is a cover of ELO's song written by Jeff Lynne. He also on here does Hide Your Heart, which was on Kiss's Hot in the Shade album, I think, if I remember right. So I think that was written by Paul Stanley. And then we've got Fractured 3 at the end, which I think is another instrumental of his there. So that concludes 1989 for me in terms of my vinyl. It's a bit of an eclectic mix, I think, for me. I don't know if that's just typical of the year. There's definitely some great stuff in there. I mentioned the Dan Reed Network. You've got Sabbath, Badlands, Blue Murder, Bad English. There's some really good stuff in there, but there's also an awful lot of mediocre stuff as well. So not sure which of those you might have in your collection. Let me know in the comments below. What am I missing from 1989? As always, I'm sure there'll be lots of you out there who by now are getting lots of probably thrash and speed metal and things like that, or you've gone down a more of a funky vibe. As I said, Dan Reed Network was probably one of the bands starting to push into that kind of vein of music as well, along with bands like Stevie Saller's Color Code, etc. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please do give me a thumbs up, and remember to subscribe if you're interested in seeing more content from me. But until next time, bye for now.